Okay, Daniel. We did Daniel 10, 11, and 12, focusing upon chapter 10 of Daniel as your primary work. That's where you should have really done your digging in and did your thorough observations of marking all your keywords, noting all your time references, making lists. Oh my goodness, how many lists were there to make on this week? I mean, I don't know if you did them or not because you were so buried in all the other work, but if you did, and if you had the time to do some of those, there are so many. You know, think about what are some of the subjects that came up in chapter 10. What are some of those keywords there? Yep, vision itself, and then that would have been quite lengthy. The word understanding, okay, yes. The message, vision, understanding. Now, is the message different from the vision? No. So the message is the vision. So it's a synonym for it, okay? Just so you know that. You could have marked message in the same way that you marked vision. And if you didn't, that's okay. You just, you know, consider the fact that once you, here's how you would have known making your list. As you start to make your list about the message, you would come to see pretty soon, go, oh, this is the vision. Because you keep going back. No. No, it wasn't. Isn't that it? That is true. It wasn't. Why do you think that is?
I looked up the word message and it was speech.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Words.
Yes.
So is that because understanding is given?
Okay, so in this vision, what was the distinction of this vision versus others? Because you brought this up earlier, that you were having trouble to figuring out, you know, what was the vision, right?
This time was just the man who's telling him the stuff.
Isn't that amazing?
Anything else, it's just you just see the angel or whoever.
Okay, so here's something that I think you've nailed in on as far as the possibility of coming to understanding about who the man in linen is. Who was the vision of? A certain man dressed in linen, and then with a gold sash wrapped or whatever, or girded with a sash of gold. The very fact that the vision was he himself, that means whoever he is, do you think he's equivalent to being any of the angels that were also mentioned throughout the text in Daniel? Like, do we see a vision of Michael? Do we see a vision of Gabriel? And although we know both of those angels are they're considered high angels or captains, archangels, right? These are the ones who have been designated with very specific works, but also been equipped with great power to accomplish whatever it is that they're assigned to do. This is the cool thing. God created Michael to do what? What does it say in chapter 12, verse 1 about Michael? He's the one who guards Israel, right? Now, if God created him and chose him, marked him out, gave him that power of an authority, do you think he's capable? Do you think anything could stop him? If God's the one empowering, can anything stop him? How about even those princes of Persia or princes of Greece? Could they have thwarted him or stopped him or held him back? No. Okay, so if you retain that thought line, the fact that God created a specific angel, gave him authority and power to do a specific job that God wants done for Israel, then consider all the rest that was said in chapter 10 and the verbiage of it, that it's not saying he's incapable or he can't or he needed help or he needed this or it's not that at all. It has to be something else. Because if for instance, Michael, who is declared to be the one who is going to watch over Israel and God put him there, you can be absolutely assured he will. Kind of makes me think of the two angels that were set to guard the Garden of Eden after the sinning occurred. Trust me, they were not going to fail. Why? Because God said, you will not have access to this any longer. That is my will. And these angels were posted there and it was not going to happen. So I think what's going to be wonderful is next week when we do our study on all these angels, which is what your whole study next week is going to be about. Who is Satan, kind of get a feel for him. I mean, we can get lost in those details too. But some of the things that I want you to just kind of make a note to yourself on as you're going to go in to do that homework is, how does this help me understand Daniel better? Not just go into it for the sake of gathering information about each of these subjects, but as you're looking at these subjects, the things that you're learning, how does that help you understand what's going on in the book of Daniel better? When you're looking at Michael, when you're looking at Gabriel, when you're looking at Satan, how does that help you understand Daniel's message that God Most High? Let's review what our book theme is. What is the theme of Daniel's book on the whole?
The sovereignty of God.
That's right. That's one of the major subjects is the sovereignty of God. What's the other major quality of God?
He rules over the realms of heaven and earth.
Okay, so that's his sovereignty, that he does rule and he reigns. But what else does he? What's his other quality?
He does what he says he's gonna do.
Okay, sovereignty.
His love for his people. His love for
Well, it's expressed in there, but is that a quality that's brought out in the book of Daniel? Love. Yeah, I mean, we can find it if we look for it hard enough, right? Absolutely. There's another quality of God is, what about all these visions? What is God saying? He reveals the future. He knows the future. He's omniscient. So he's sovereign and omniscient. He's powerful and he's all seeing and all knowing. So, and the fact that he's all seeing and all knowing, he also is sovereign to command certain things and he is able to make them come to fruition, right? So he says something and then he does it. And in the process of doing that, what's his relationship with people on the earth?
Well, he wants us to know his word, and he wants us to know what's coming in the future
Right.
so that we can get right.
Yeah, so you can get it right. Okay. The premise behind the book of Daniel on the whole is about a nation that was called out to be his representative in the world. We've talked about this quite a bit last week in the opening. And for that reason, God chose them. And then, of course, they failed in it. And so God had to then reply in the way that he said he would. What covenant was Israel in with God? Israel, the nation.
They were in a conditional covenant,
Yeah.
but he was in an unconditional covenant.
Daniel also, yes, okay. So again, let's just keep that in mind that there are kind of two covenants going on all in the Old Testament on the whole. The first covenant is that there's a relational thing that God wants. He wanted that with Adam and Eve, and he established a pattern there with them. He wanted it with Abraham, and he called him out and said, if you'll obey me, I will do these things, right? And then when Abraham was obedient in that covenant through Moses, get my guys right. Noah and Moses get mixed up in my head. Moses then was given a covenant for the people that he had created through the Abrahamic covenant. Abraham, he created a covenant. We call it the Abrahamic covenant, right? And that's a covenant of grace. And he simply believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. So Galatians 3 is your commentary, your New Testament commentary on what happened with Abraham, just so you know that. And then he came along, and once he created that nation that he had promised to Abraham, now he made another covenant, a distinctive covenant, a different covenant. This one, as Kathleen said, is conditional. What was Israel supposed to do in this covenant? What was the conditional part? Obey him, and what would God do? Bless him, and disobey, and he would curse him. Now, why do you think he did that? Just because he wants his own way?
They were supposed to be a light unto the nations and to show who God was to the other people. And if they're not going to do that, then for his name's sake, he needs to not punish, but chastise them.
Right, because the whole purpose for the nation was that they were to be his servant, his tool, his witness. They were to proclaim the glories of who God is, so that the whole world, not just them, the whole world would come to know who he is. And therefore, out of reverence and respect, out of love and gratitude, then they would turn to God and worship and obey him. So when they wouldn't do that, then what happens to that nation who is called by his name? Yeah, they had to be dispersed because they were profaning God's holy name to the world. They were saying, we belong to God. Watch us sin. We can sin better than you. Look what we're going to do. We're going to bring false gods into the very tabernacle of God and set them up and worship them there. Remember how was it Tammuz that they set up a statue right at the gate, it said in Ezekiel, of the entry into the Holy of Holies, or into the entry of the holy place. They set this up, and the women were out there and they were crying, it said, for Tammuz and for her son, who is a false worship system. And so God says, you've profaned my name. The world's watching. You're called by my name and they're seeing you do this. This is not what I want you to be like for the world. So this is kind of backdrop to everything that we're looking at. So as we go through Daniel, God is presenting himself both as sovereign and omniscient, and on both sides. And the key, let's go to chapter 2, verse 20, 21 and 22. Someone look those up for me. And just remind ourselves, this is one of the possible verses for a key verse for us. And I think it's really probably the best one, in my opinion, just because it's 21 and 22 of chapter 2. We could start in 20 just because it kind of starts at the beginning of the sentence. Let's do that. Somebody read 20 through 22.
Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what's in the darkness, and light dwells with him.
Okay, very good. Now, the interesting thing is, I noticed in your translation, it says he gives knowledge to men who have understanding. It really should say, it should say it this way: knowledge to men of understanding, meaning they got their wisdom, they got their knowledge because God gave it to them, not because they were already knowledgeable, therefore, God gave them more. So sometimes translations it's very important that you work with a really good translation that doesn't confuse you, or that you make notes to yourself so that you can receive it correctly. What he's saying there is, if a man has knowledge, guess who gave it to him? God did, right? Okay, so it is God's, for wisdom and power belong to God. It is he who changes the times and the epochs. So he's in charge of the way that things unfold in history for mankind. And it says he removes kings and establishes kings. Now, how does that relate to what we've been looking at this week in chapter 10, 11, and 12? They came and went, didn't they? And in Daniel 10, was there any clue in there to us as to how they were coming and wenting? Yes, they did. And that's in chapter 11. But what about in chapter 10? How did you see God's interaction with the rising up and the falling of kings and kingdoms? Did you see anything in there that showed you that actually there is a spiritual realm that's working on behalf of either holding them back, staying, or even protecting? One thing does say at the opening of 11 that is interesting. Did you see what it says at the opening of 11? What does it say there?
It says, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I rose to be an encouragement and a protection for them.
Okay, so this is interesting. In the first year, is that correct?
Yeah.
In the first year of Darius, yeah, you have to go way back in history. But what it tells you is when that nation began, this man in linen arose to be a protection and an encouragement for him. What does it tell you?
So it was the man in
I
linen,
didn't know.
Well,
not Michael, because
pardon? One like a man. Okay, that's fine. I'm not gonna quibble over how you have interpreted, and there's a big debate on this. I am going to teach you from the perspective how I have come to receive this information, how I see it, and I'll explain to you my reasonings. But there is debate on it, and very good, very godly men that I respect and women that I respect see this could be a variety of peoples, and that it could be simply angels, and we're going to talk about that. But for the moment, what I'm going to say though is whoever this one is, whether it's the man in linen or whether it's just a general angel on the whole, whoever that angel is, this one like a man is saying to them what? I arose to be his protection and his encouragement.
Actually, it says a certain man.
Yes.
Not one like a man,
A certain man. Yeah, okay. Distinction, right? Okay, let's just dive into this. Let's just dive into this certain man. Let's look at this vision to start with, and then we're going to go into the certain man in linen. And then what we're going to do is look also at some of the concepts of the subject of spiritual warfare, because you did see that became a huge subject, right? So we had spiritual warfare, we have the subjects of the man in linen, we have the vision itself. Oh boy, I know I did a lot of lists. What else did we do? Oh, by the way, when we're done with this, don't let me forget to tell you, I did this many moons ago. I don't remember. I think it might even be the last one, but if I'll get up kind of close so they can see what I've got going here. I went through every chapter and noted every reference to spiritual beings being present and what was going on with them, what they did and so forth. And I just made notes of them. And that helped me a lot too, to see on the whole what's going on in Daniel concerning spiritual beings and how they're playing a part in what God is doing. What's going on in the spiritual realm actually is quite profound in the book of Daniel, which is unique to most books. There's not quite this much exposure of the heavenly realm to us in anywhere in scripture. There's often just one note or one little word in passing as you go through on a totally different subject, and we never stop to really look at it. But Daniel is loaded. You could stop at the end of, when we finish up at the end of Daniel, we could stop and go back and do a whole study just on the spiritual appearances and who they might be and how we see them interacting. Once you've got Daniel done, and you've got a full understanding of what was going on, and the author's purpose there was to show that God raises kings up and puts them down, and he knows what's in the future, right? So there's this balance then that he's in control of it. He's orchestrating things on planet Earth for mankind's purposes, for his purpose for mankind, let me put it that way, because he has a design purpose, what he wants to accomplish there. So that would be a fun study to do after the fact. And we're going to just kind of barely tap into it here. And the sad thing is, I think, is honestly, if we had gone back and done this in a homework session for a week, maybe even earlier, maybe at the beginning of 7 or something, even gone back and said, what did you see in the first 6 chapters concerning supernatural appearances, even the handwriting on the wall, remember? So then you would get a better picture of what's going on in the spiritual realm of things here for us. And I think it would give you a better balance of what's going on now. But okay, so let's go back then and let's just start with the vision, because I want to nail down what you saw about this vision first, because I think that's the foundation that we need to build first and foremost. Okay, now, when was the vision? Let's start there. Okay. 3rd year of Cyrus. Okay, and who is Cyrus? He's king of Persia. Okay, that's in 10:1. So it opens telling you the win factor, which is really interesting because it tells you that in the opening of 10, but then in the opening of 11, it says, and in the first year of Darius, I did what? I arose to be a protection and an encouragement, or I can't remember which order that was in, encouragement and a protection. Okay, so Cyrus, this is when the vision comes. What was Daniel doing? Who? I guess I should have asked the question differently. Who had the vision? Daniel had the vision. Okay. And what brought this vision on? It says Daniel was mourning. Now, how did it describe his mourning? Okay. Mourning, and it was for 3 weeks. Now, did anybody do any research on what that 3-week period was about, or when it possibly was, or why he was where he was at? Well, I'm just in commentary work at the end. After you've done your homework at the end, you could have done a little bit. Here's the one thing I said. Somebody said it was in a certain month, and it was in the month when there was one of the feasts that was taking place. Nisan, right? Passover, right? Okay, so it was the time of Passover. He was out there because he has no temple, and he has no way to make sacrifices as they had been before. So what he was doing is he went to the river, which, by the way, in scripture you see that a lot, where on the Lord's day they would go to the river because there's something about the flowing river that makes them feel as a place of worship. It's considered a place of worship for them in the Old Testament and in the New. So there's Daniel again by the river, and this week of fasting and mourning, where it's an abstinence, not of total abstinence from food, but restricted food, right? Restricted the things that he can take in. What was he allowed to? Yeah, the tasty things, right? Do you remember how Daniel opened up? The book of Daniel opened in chapter 1. That's it. So probably what we're talking about is he wasn't eating of the meats, he wasn't drinking of the wines. It talked about no ointment on his skin, right? But that he was simply basically eat water and vegetables, probably fruits and vegetables. So Daniel has gone back to this place of fruits and vegetables. This feast. Thank you, honey. The feast week was supposed to be for 1 week. And how long did he feast for? How long did he fast for? 3. So could there be something symbolic in that? Do you think there's a message for us?
Well, like, it sounds like he started his fasting before he hit the Passover time, because it says on the 24th day of the first month. Passover is on the 14th day of the first month.
Yeah.
So he started it before Passover, and then it sounded like he feasted
Beyond it.
beyond.
So that in the end, so what was required was 1, but what did he do? 3. What is the symbolic gesture of 3 of anything ever?
He went above and beyond like he always did.
Yes. And what is 3 in the biblical realm of things? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's a number of completeness, right? A fulfillment or fullness. So it's very interesting to me that it was for 3 weeks. Not that that's anything profound, but just that it's interesting that he did it for a full 3 weeks. And he said it for the entire 3 weeks. I mean, he was careful to make sure that we understood it wasn't almost 3 weeks. It was 3 whole weeks. So it was almost like there was a deliberateness to it there on his part to some degree. But also, what is it then that ended his fasting? Who appeared? A vision, right? He had a vision. Okay, so let's look at Daniel's vision. Daniel's vision.
And to me, that's important that he stayed in prayer and fasting
Until God answered.
understand.
Yes, yeah. He went into that because he had a great desire to understand. What do you think he was wanting to understand? Those previous visions thus far. On the whole, what are those previous visions about? Explain. If I have never done Daniel before. I'm just your friend hanging out with you at the coffee shop. Well, what's Daniel's all about? What's going on in Daniel?
Excuse me.
Bless you.
The changing of the kings and kingdoms
Okay.
through time.
Okay, through time. So it's kind of a historical record of, well, like those visions that were given to us. One was a statue and one were beasts. But what were those representative of? Kingdoms that would come and go. And there seems to be a sequential order that's given to us, right? Okay.
What was previous?
And chapter 9, he had just had a vision about those 70 weeks, right? And what was the emphasis to all of it? What is the reason to tell us about these kings and kingdoms? Just so we know that kings and kingdoms. So do you think God's purpose is just to tell man about history that's going to unfold, or is it to give them hope for something? A coming kingdom. And where is Israel at the time of these visions? They're in their captivity. So how would these visions have encouraged someone like Daniel and his friends?
He knows it won't be like that forever.
There you go. There's hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I've got a plan, Daniel. It's for your nation. It's to give you hope and a future. And what is that future? What is the end conclusion of all these visions so far? What happens at the grand finale?
God's building up his everlasting kingdom.
There you go. God's everlasting kingdom gets inaugurated. Once the kingdoms of men have come and gone and come and gone and come and gone, then at the end, God says his stone will crush and his stone becomes a great mountain and fills the whole earth. Whew. Don't you know Daniel's going, yes, thank you, Lord. There is going to be a day of victory for Israel in his mind, but for you and I, it's for all believers, right? As we view it. But when you're a Daniel and you're living in that day and you're God's people, and he happens to be one of God's people who is actually serious about his relationship, because probably, I'm certain of it, his real covenant is the Abrahamic covenant of faith. He believed God when God said he was going to do certain things. And in particular, he was looking forward to that coming seed, which then in Daniel chapter 9 is brought up. It's that Messiah who Israel is looking forward to his coming. And God says, and when he comes, these are going to be the things that are going to unfold. So we saw a lot of those in Daniel 9. Okay, so when this vision is described to us in chapter 10, what does it tell us about the vision that God gives to him here? In 10:1, what does it tell us? Yes. It's a vision. Okay, that is true. Now, it didn't say that in 10:1. It said that actually in 11, right? Is it 10:11? Yeah. Okay.
It says the message was true and one of great conflict.
Okay. A message of great conflict. Now, why do you think God keeps giving Daniel messages about great conflict? Ladies, you're pregnant, you're going to give birth in 9 months, but along the way, there's going to be good days and bad days. You are going to hit a point when you enter into labor, and it's not going to be fun. But let me tell you what happens at the end of that. Can you kind of make the analogy by thinking of it in that manner? If you're a Jew, and what God is saying to him about his nation is, there is going to be great conflict along the way. There are going to be wars. There are going to be kings who are despicable, right? Who do horrible things to you, particularly to you who? The Jews, to Israel, to the nation of Israel. Because why? Why do you think they're attacking Israel? Why is Israel always the center of conflict for the world, even yet today?
They oppose God.
Yeah, because
The world opposes God.
the world opposes God, and the world looks at them and they understand that there is a blessing upon Israel. All you have to do is look at the wars that they've gone through and how miraculously they won them, right? And therefore, then you can look at those things and say, whoa, they have a powerful God that's on their side. Or if they're secular, boy, they are lucky. Those people have all the luck. Look at how, I mean, that should have never happened. That's just a miracle. Now, they won't attribute the miracle to God's hand, but they will recognize it's a miracle. There's no explainable way to explain Israel even yet today. Back on its land after 2,000 years of having ceased to be a nation, and now they're back for the last 70 plus years.
And they're now called a nation, and they have a capital.
And their capital is what? Jerusalem. Back to exactly where God said he was going to bring them. And so you can understand then that God has to tell Daniel way back in history, look, Daniel, there is a plan, but I want you to know this plan involves great conflicts. Now, for us to come to a full understanding of why all these years of conflict, why were they necessary? Why would God have to allow people generation after generation after generation struggle in this way? There you go. Testing. Absolutely. Testing. Refining. See, this is starting to sound like a verse. Purifying and purging, right? It's process that God has for really every single human being, all of us, being Jew or not being Jew. God tests and refines, purifies, purges. And I think one of the things we have seen with COVID is that kind of purging and refining within our church. And those who truly love the Lord are the ones that are coming out shining like the stars, right? And those that don't stand firm, won't continue to walk in their faith, what happens? They're purged, right? So if you kind of take that concept then and apply it back to Israel, because that's what Daniel, the book of Daniel is about, is us witnessing how God is treating the whole world, basically, through a nation so that they will be an example to us. This is why when you talk about Judah and Israel, the north and the south, when they divided as a kingdom, how Judah didn't learn from her sister Israel. And then eventually 100 years or so later, God came in and had to do to them exactly what he had done to those of the north. But there was a strong rebuke in the scriptures about that she had not Ebola and Hobala or whatever their names were, those funny names, right? She didn't learn from her sister's mistakes. And God is saying to you and I, even today, watch Israel, look at her and learn. Learn, who am I? What is my plan? Am I capable? If I say it, do I do it? Okay, so this is what we should be learning as we're struggling through parsing out these pieces. Don't let the pieces of the puzzle overwhelm you, but keep in mind the bigger picture. What is the goal? The goal is that God wants you to understand who he is and to come to worship him. And he wants you to understand he's using Israel as his light in the nation, even to this very day. He's still using them. Even when they weren't on their land, it was a light. It was to say, see what happens when you don't obey. See what happens to people who reject me and my word and my ways. They will be abandoned. And although we're only seeing it on a temporal level in this fleshly world, there's an eternal spiritual truth to what God was teaching. All right, so he says to him then, Daniel's vision, it's a vision that is true. I love that. And it's
10:11 is not correct. It's 10:1 and 10:21, but not 10:11.
10:1, and this is 10:21?
No, 10:1 and 10:21.
That way?
No.
Backwards?
The vision that is true is mentioned in 10:1 and 10:21.
Okay.
And the great conflict is in 1.
Is 1. Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You got it right. I had 2 and 1. That's all I had, verses 1 and 2. So that was it, 1 and 2. A vision that is true and a vision that is of great conflict.
That's one sentence in verse.
Thank you. So that's where I actually pulled my answer from. And so, yeah, we'll all get on the same page eventually, as long as we're all together. What I want you to see is in verse 1 and 2, he tells them what the message of the vision is all about. And I tell you what, if you just get that much in your head, then move on to chapter 11 and you'll be in better shape already right from the beginning. You just understand it's about conflict, right? And that it's true. So if these facts are true, then you can rest in that. Now, he says then in his vision, what was the vision that was presented to him? What did he see? Yeah, he said, I lifted my eyes in verse 5. I lifted my eyes. What does that tell you? Where's this guy coming from? The heavenlies. I lifted my eyes. I looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen. So what is the vision? It's of a certain man dressed in linen. Now, I'm just going to put a little puffy cloud around that because that's what he saw. That was the vision this time. It wasn't four beasts coming up out of the sea. It wasn't a statue, right? The last vision we had was given to us mostly just in word form. It doesn't tell us what he saw, but it was more about a communication that was given to him in that vision, right? So in this one, though, again, it's mostly, he doesn't see before him the wars, but what he sees before him is the man in linen who then tells him about these things, right? He says, and my words are true. So now that we know the vision is about a man dressed in linen, that's what he's seeing. What do we see that the vision was about? And we know this man in linen rather is giving him a message. I'm going to change my color here so that we can see it. So this is the message. What is the message? What did he tell him about? On the whole, well, the first thing I want you to note is where we see at the beginning of his conversation. He says, first of all, he declares to Daniel, Daniel, you're a man of what? High esteem. Boy, I want that one. I know. Cool. It's such a cool thing. Gosh, you're highly esteemed. What does that mean? Esteemed. Respected, honored. That he has integrity. If he's esteemed, he's valued. If you esteem something, you value it. You love it, of course, but that's slightly different nuance to it. But valuable. That's really cool if you're thinking about a message about servants to God, people who were to be his servant, those who were the sons of Judah who were to throw praises to God, right? This is one who does that. He's valued. He's highly esteemed because he is functioning in the capacity for which God created him. And so he's valued for that reason. Okay, then he says in verse 12, let's go up to 12. He said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel. So the first thing this man in linen does is he comforts him. He gives him a calming sense. You don't need to fret about this. I know that what you're seeing and what I'm showing you might be frightening, but I want you to not be afraid. How often do we see that in scripture? How often did Christ on his earthly ministry say that to his disciples? Fear not, right? Do not be afraid. He says, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and on humbling yourself before God. What is this? There's a word there, this. He says, you set your heart on understanding this. This what? Previous visions. All this history that God is giving him about kings and kingdoms and about God's coming kingdom. So he's speaking about in totality of all these years previous that he's had with Daniel, even with Nebuchadnezzar, and that Daniel has interpreted for him. these kingdoms that he has revealed to him, and the struggles and the battles and the people and the event. I mean, there's a lot, right? If you go back starting in Daniel 2 and look at all the visions that have taken place and accumulate all that information together, it's a big load of information, right? And so Daniel is pondering back on all these things he's already experienced and been told through these visions, and he's really wanting to understand it. I think he kind of grasps it on a certain level, but there are details in there. He wants more. I think that's where you and I are today. Okay, we get the big picture, God. But who's this? Who's that she right there? Right? Or who's that he right there? Why did he do that? Right? So that's, I think, what Daniel was doing. He's like, okay, I get the big picture. Who's she? Right? All right. So here we go. Then he said, do not be afraid. He said, you've set your heart on understanding this, all these things that I've shown you so far, and on humbling yourself before your God. Your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But now, if you didn't circle it and mark it and highlight it, circle that but right there, because that tells you it's a continuation to what he's just said to him. You have set your heart on this, but, well, actually, it's not that you set your heart on it. I heard you from the very first part of your words. I heard you from the very beginning. But now, why would he give him this? The prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. Now, why in the world would this man in linen tell him about this? Where are these activities taking place? Where did this man come from? The spiritual realm. So what is he telling him about here? What did he tell him? He told him what? Yes, he told him about spiritual of warfare, right? In the heavenlies. Okay, that's the first thing he told him about. Now, we can go into detail and kind of break all that down. He says to him, presently, right now, I am fighting against the prince of Persia. Now, we can try to parse that out, but if you know it's a spiritual realm battle and he's fighting against the Persians in this regard, the Persian spiritual realm, he's saying, up in verse 1, the 3rd year of King of Cyrus. So it's only in the 3rd year of this reign. We know this reign is going to go on for a period of time. I wrote it down somewhere, like 100 years or something like that, right? Or several hundred, maybe. Can't remember now. Hold on. I think I've got it on page. Well, it's 3 something, and I think it goes until 5 or something like that, right? What is I got to find my chart. Hold on. I'll do this better. I know I'm leaving this too vaguely for you. I have where's your timeline chart? Do you guys have it?
Yeah.
Do you have dates on there? When does Persia end? And no, here's mine. Okay. I did this last night because I got a little bit confused on it. Let me just tell you something. You can mark it on your timeline chart. So if you have this timeline chart that we did a long time ago, this would be in your appendix, page 125. Okay, do you remember this one? Okay, the first part of it you were supposed to mark out, and I had told you, well, I even color code mine just so that I can see it better when one starts and when one ends. The one that's not on this chart is Greece. I added it. Do you see how I add a little strip of orange on there? And I don't have any details on it, but I did add it onto mine just because I need the perspective, right? So Babylon was from 605 to 539 approximately, right? So put that in on your map. So I wrote it in here. I just penciled it in right here underneath where I had written Babylon, then I wrote the years here, okay? Then Medo-Persia is 539 to 333. So how many years is that? 200 something years, right? 333. 333 is when it ends. Greece is from 333 to 129. Now, I didn't go to Rome, but I got to Greece. Okay, so that'll help you see. Now, so if this is the 3rd year of Cyrus's reign, and Medo-Persia is going to last for 200 years, and yet already we see this man in linen doing what? Fighting against Persia. And yet in 11:1 it said about that same kingdom, the Medes, right, that he had done what? Arose to be a encouragement and a protection for them. So how might you work that out in your thinking about what's going on here? When he says I'm fighting against them, obviously he's not destroying them, but could he? Absolutely, he has the power. Who has the power here? God's angels or God himself, right? And God will do exactly what God wants. According to Daniel 2, he raises up kings, he puts them down. And according to everything else we've looked at as another key subject in here, appointed times, right? At the determined time. So if we know all that in our backdrop, then we look at this and we say, no, wait a minute. At the beginning, he was there to defend them. Now it seems like he's fighting against them, and yet they're going to have 200 more years. So what is that talking about? I was fighting against him. And he says for 21 years, or for 21 days rather, because Daniel had prayed for 21 days. So what do you think is going on there? Fighting obviously doesn't mean to destroy, because they're going to have 200 more years yet.
Well, battling back the demons and stuff overhead, that might be our keeping, that are trying to take over.
Very good.
Blocking, so it's like, I don't know, demons, however you want to look at it. Spiritual demons, bad angels, whatever.
The bad angels, the good angels, they're battling.
They're fighting, and I can't get through here because they keep whacking me, and I have to keep
Right.
whacking them back.
So what does that tell you about, even today, about what's going on in the heavenly realm concerning our kingdoms that are yet standing today?
Bunch of demons flying over America.
Well,
That's what's happening.
that's right. You only see the demons. See, and I see the spiritual warfare of the good. That's right. Whoever this man in linen is, he has an active role in the participation of this, right? And when he speaks about this being the angels, the host of heaven are the ones who are engaging in this battle, right? Have we seen anything previous to this about there being a commander of the host? Oh, yeah. Back in chapter 8, verses 10 and 11. Someone go back and look at that. Now, in that case, he's speaking there about the host, and it's the Jewish people, right? So now how do we reconcile that? Did anybody ever do a word study on the word host and what that meant? Yes, we did. What was it? There you go.
It can be angels.
Yes.
And it can be, there's one more. Isn't there?
Well, kind of, I think that covers it. It can be people or angels. So there's hosts, and hosts simply in translation is armies, right? And I will add one more in there. There's also Christians in the present age. Now, we weren't there in the time that this was written, but today there are. So what we can say, and I did this really cool thing. I found a song to cover this. I'm not going to sing, so don't worry, because I cannot sing. If I could, I would, but somebody in here can. Onward, Christian soldiers, right? Yes, there you go. I'm so glad you're singing and not me. Okay. With the cross of Jesus going on before, Christ the royal master leads against the foe, forward into battle, see his banners go. Now this thing goes on and on about onward Christian soldiers marching as to war with the cross of Jesus going on before. At the sign of triumph, Satan's host will fall, or doth fall, flee, it says. From then, Christian soldiers on to victory. On then, Christian soldiers on to victory. I can't read my own. Okay. So it talks about us like a mighty army moves the church of God, right? Talks about in the next stanza, kingdoms, nations, empires in destruction rolled, it says. Gates of hell can never against the church prevail. We have Christ's own promise, and that cannot fail. Glory, laud, and honor unto Christ the King. This through countless ages, men and angels sing. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Now, if you don't think there's a host among the Christian church, let me read a few verses here for you. Here's one in 2 Timothy 2:3. Suffer with me hardship as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life, so that he may please the one who has enlisted him as a soldier. Who enlisted us? Who enlisted us to be a soldier? God, Christ, right? He says, 2 Corinthians 10:3-5. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war against the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. And we are taking everything captive to the obedience of Christ. Now, this is interesting because the Christian soldier is not one that, like Israel, actually put war garb on and went out with a sword and slayed its enemies. However, why did God have Israel doing that? What's Israel's purpose? To show the world who God is. And when they put their warrior outfits on, they went out to battle on the field. How did that bring God glory? How did it bring God glory in 1948 when Israel reestablished itself as a nation and they were this big? Because he fought the battle for them. If you are fighting for God, you win. When you're on God's side, when you're doing it his way, when you're being in obedience to him. That's the whole picture in this. So you look at the wars that went on with Israel and everything that we're seeing here even. What God is simply saying is, when you are for me, nothing can prevail over you. There you go. Say it again, Cliff.
God is for me.
Who can be against me? Back into Romans, right?
It makes me think of that king I don't know which king it was, but when I don't know if it was the Syrians or someone was coming against him, and he prayed, Lord, I don't know what to do.
Yes.
And God slayed them before they even
Right.
met them.
They never even went into battle. They didn't lift the sword. That happened on more than one occasion where God simply took the battle for them. They slayed themselves in the darkness. They got confused and killed themselves. So what God tells us is in Ephesians 6, then, you and I as Christians, he says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God. Right? And he goes on. So we are soldiers, right? Okay. Now that you have that set in your mind, you go back and you look at this warfare that's going on in the heavenlies. In Daniel's message here, he says in these verses here, he told him of warfare that was going on in the heavenlies. Why is that profound? Presently, he's fighting against the prince of Persia, but before he had arose to be a protection for them. Now he's fighting against them, but they've got 200 years to go. So that warfare is not a warfare to destroy them, but to do what? Keep them in balance, not to go too far, not to go beyond the power that God wants to allow them to have.
Okay, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I looked at it as different. Like he's fighting against the principalities, the demons or whatever, but he's there as protection for the human people, because Cyrus has a job to do also that comes into play.
Well, that's true too.
Right?
In a way that works.
Maybe like protecting the
Right.
from having just
Yes.
all the way.
Yes, I think you and I are actually saying the same thing. What it's showing us is there's a spiritual battle that keeps things in the correct perspective that God wants. He doesn't allow any one man or any one nation to gain too much power. He also protects his own. For instance, Daniel and the 3 men. So in fact, what happened when the 3 men were thrown into the fire and should have been immediately killed? Who showed up? Who showed up? A 4th man. What did Nebuchadnezzar say he looked like? One who looks like the son of gods, I mean, he didn't understand the Son of God. Nobody really did in those days yet, right? They knew of the Messiah that was coming. But what he did do was recognize whoever was in that fire with him had something to do with God. It looked like a son of the gods. Oh, you know, it was you had to be a spiritual enlightening that God. Well, you know, we talked about Nebuchadnezzar coming into faith at one point. He finally is humbled, right? But little by little, isn't that how God brings us in usually? He enlightens us on little pieces of truth and reveals himself to us little by little. Often we come in gradually. It isn't always a one-time event for most people. Abraham was years. Huh?
Doesn't he do it right in the very beginning when Daniel tells him God interpreted the dream? Just in chapter 1. At the end, he comes up and says something about surely your God is a God of gods and the Lord of kings.
Yes.
And a revealer of mysteries.
Yes. And then in two, yes, he's already beginning to, and that's where we talked about previously the witness of these sons of Judah, how they were actually throwing the praises of God to those around them. They were put in a very bad situation, being punished along with their nation because their nation had failed. But now, as sons of Judah, they were honoring God, and therefore God was blessing them, and they were witnessing to the king and others in the kingdom at that time. So they literally were God's servant. That's why he calls him here a man of high esteem. You're valued because you're actually doing what I intended for you to be doing as a nation, you are doing as an individual. Isn't that an awesome thing? Okay, we got to hurry. Yeah, we're never going to get there. Okay, so he told them about the heavenly warfare. He told them, what did he tell them about Greece? In the next one. Yeah, he told him Greece is coming. So Daniel had already had those previous dreams, and he saw these beasts arise out of the sea, and now he's understanding those are nations. He just didn't know which ones at that first time when he had the visions, but now God's telling him Greece is coming. So we now know the third beast is Greece. Okay, we actually knew that anyway in chapter 8 because God interpreted it for us, right? Now, what he also told them on the whole in chapter 11 about what? Just kind of generically give us a totality of what's going on in 11. What does he tell him about?
Kings of the north are fighting the kings of the south.
Yeah, there are going to be wars coming that are ahead for the various kings, right? They're going to fight and banter back and forth. And who's at the center of all this fighting? Who keeps getting mentioned throughout all of chapter 11? He calls them the beautiful land or the jewel of their nation. Who is that? Who's the beautiful land? The Jews. So because Daniel's interest is Israel and his people and his nation, that's what this whole book's about. And so what God has told him now is this. He told him here about wars that are ahead. So he knows that way. Is it helpful to you if your doctor says, now you're really, really sick right now, and it's going to take some time, and there's going to be a lot of exercises you're going to have to do to get better, or you're going to have to take this medicine, or we're going to have to do this surgery, but eventually we're going to get there, right? So does it help, though, if your doctor lets you know there's going to be a struggle along the way, as opposed to saying, oh, tomorrow you'll be better, and then tomorrow you're not, and you're going, right? But by God telling him, look, there are wars ahead for you and your people. There are wars ahead in the world. And these wars, I just want you to be aware of the fact, I know about these wars. I know, and now I'm telling you, they're going to be tough times ahead. So we're not there yet, but I'm just letting you know that there are wars ahead, and his holy people and his city and his people are going to suffer. There's going to be suffering for Israel in the midst of this time. His people and his city, right, will suffer. That's basically what you're seeing in all of chapter 11, right? Okay, I'm not going to go through that because we're going to skip on down to the next thing. What else did he tell him? Well, there's a question posed in chapter 12 about how long, O Lord, right? So what does he tell him in this? He told him what? Chapter 12, you could go to verse 7. I'll help you out. Give you a little push.
Time, times, and half a time.
There's going to be a time times a half a time. And what else is going to happen in that? And
As they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed.
okay, so what has he told him in this vision in chapter 10, 11, 12? He's telling him these events will be completed. And he gives him some indicators of time, points of reference. Remember before when he said, from the issuing of a decree until Messiah the Prince, it will be, and he gave him the time. And now there's one more week out there lingering. What we now know about that 1 week is there's a time factor that keeps popping up that's called time, times, and half a time. And we don't have that totally all ironed out yet, but we do know it also encompasses a full 1 week. How many is a 1 week? A period of 7 years, right? Because the time, and half a times is 3.5 years. We've already figured that one out through 42 months and 1,260 days in Revelation. So we now know we have a 1 week period that's out ahead. And in that 1 week period, there's a specific time called time, times, and half a time. And what God is saying, when that's done, it's finished. But until that time, times, and half a time comes and goes, it ain't finished. That's good English, right? Okay. So he told them these events will be completed.
What verses is Katie?
7 of chapter 12. When? So in that one, he's got a time tab. Number 1, it's the I'm just going to put it this way: 3.5 years are completed when the 3.5 years are done. And then number 2, when the shattering of the holy people is finished. What is the shattering of the power of the holy people? What might that be talking about?
Well, who is they? It says, and as soon as they finish shattering.
Okay, well, last week we did a timeline and we talked about the prince who is to come, and his people would first destroy the city and the sanctuary, and that occurred when? 70 AD. And who was the they there? Rome. And at the end of time, the prince who is to come is factored into the 7-year period, the 1 week. He has something to do with those they, which is Rome, that kingdom, that beast. When they are finished shattering the power of the holy people, then it's going to be finished. What does it mean, shattering of the power of the holy people?
Well, Jerusalem is completely overtaken.
Destroying the kingdom of Israel.
Okay. Maybe. What power would be something that God would want to destroy? Pardon? Well, definitely the Antichrist, but in this case, it's the power of the holy people. So it's not about Satan.
It wouldn't be a
Thank you. Say that again. Their disobedience. What is it? He's saying, I am going to finish when that beast of the end times finishes shattering the power, the disobedience, the rebellion of the holy people. When that is finished, and how is God going to finish it? He's going to do it through that 1 week time frame. Now, you might want to build on that and make sure that we get a fuller picture of that. But I think that's what it's speaking of, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Shattering the power, meaning the resistance and the rebellion of the holy people. Okay, so let's put that in. So when shattering of the power, it's not destroying the people, it's the power of the holy people. And it is the holy people. So you got to, and the holy people are, and who are the holy people in the context of Daniel on the whole? the Jews, Israel, the nation, who is right now and is still in rebellion to Jesus Christ as their Savior, who God had promised to them. I will give you a land, a seed, and a nation. New Testament, Galatians 3:16, and that seed is Christ. They are yet rebelling against that. When that is finished, when God finishes that resistance that they're giving to that message that Jesus is the Christ, when he finishes that, what another verse tells us, it's not in homework this week, but it says, and they will look upon him whom they have pierced, and they will mourn. And when that day comes, it's finished. He will have finished shattering the power of the holy people. Okay, that's in 12:7. I know, did that give you goosebumps or what? Okay, one more thing he tells him in 12 verse 10.
Many will be purged, purified, and refined.
So he's giving him hope. Here's the hope. He says, many will be purged, purified, refined. Many will be. Well, that first part isn't sounding so good. Many are going to be purged. I don't like that one. But the purified's not bad, right? And being refined is good. Although refining sometimes can hurt a little bit, right? And then he contrasts that with a but. But what's going to happen? But? So the contrast is whatever this purging, purifying, and refining is, it doesn't matter what God does. There's still going to be some who will still resist. But, so there's our but. Put your contrast there. The wicked will act wickedly.
And they won't understand.
Yep.
Boy, didn't we see that the last 3 years of the tribulation? Oh my God.
Yep. One last told. What did he tell him concerning the message in 11:2? First, and now I will tell you the truth. So he was told him the truth. Wow, that's good stuff, guys. Okay, so here's what we know the vision is about. Greece is coming. There are wars ahead for your people, and your people are going to suffer. This time will end. All this suffering will end. All these wars will end when that 3.5 years that are decreed by God are completed, and when the shattering of the power of the holy people is done. Those two things are simultaneous. And he said to him, he also told him, I just want you to know, many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will still go on acting wickedly. Don't be surprised about that. And he also tells him, yeah, he says at the closing concerning Daniel, close up this book, go on your way. What's going to happen? And what's going to happen to Daniel? He will enter and he will rise again. It's a resurrection statement. Isn't that cool? He told him the truth, and he told him 12:13, you will rise again. Isn't that exciting? Don't you worry, Daniel. Your soul is safe in my hand and in my keeping. You will be rewarded. You keep on doing what you're supposed to be doing. And understand this, in our world, there's going to be wars and tribulations and trials, and your people, specifically Israel, will have a lot of hardship. There's going to be a lot of war. There's going to be a lot of people coming against them. But I'm allowing it because ultimately what I want to do is refine, purify, and purge. I want to bring people into faith. And at the end of the age, when God finishes all these things, when they're done, it will happen. And Romans says, and all Israel shall be saved. Who's all Israel? All Israel who will lift their eyes and confess Christ is the seed that was to come. It won't be the ones who don't. Any of those who don't, what's going to happen to them? Purged. Yes, sad. Okay, now, how much time have I got? I got about 30 minutes. Okay, we did pretty good. I zipped through that.
Possible that as soon as he wrote this down, he then died, and that's why 10:1 is written in a different person. I keep wondering, why is 10:1 written that this message was revealed to Daniel, and 10:2 it says I Daniel. So it's like somebody finished this for him by going back and writing it.
You know what? I hadn't pondered on that one.
It just hit me when I read.
You know, we see him do that actually through here. We also see him switch languages too. I think in some ways he could have been dictating to someone, and he could have been for the purpose of identifying who was having the vision. He had to say, you know, I Daniel, or he had to say a message was revealed to Daniel. I mean, actually, verse 1 is really distinct. I don't know if you took a look at that. How is verse 1 related to what follows it?
Daniel 10.
Yes, 10.
Summary.
Yes, it's a little summary, because right at he understood it. That's what caught my attention. He understood it, but later he says, I didn't understand. But what had to happen through the course of all of it? He had to have been told. There had to be an explanation given. And we see what he was told here. Isn't that a nice little list? Isn't that cool? That's very concise. I liked that list. And when I was done with it, I went, thank you, Lord. You're so good to me. Okay. All right, let's move on. Certain man dressed in linen. Let's talk about this fella, because this is a tough one and it's very controversial. And all I'm going to do is guide you in the way that I went. And if you have gone by the way of believing that this is speaking of just an angel, it's fine with me if you believe that. It's okay. The end result is still the same. The angel accomplishes everything that he has said in there. It's still a messenger from God, whoever he is, right? But I felt like it was pretty blatant to me who he was. And even when you see these sections in here about spiritual warfare, remember what we talked about a minute ago is, why is he bringing up the fact that he's fighting against Persia in the third year, but in the first year he was supporting them, and yet they've got 200 more years to go? What does that tell you about that kind of warfare? Is it a warfare to destroy them in the moment? What does it tell you about that kind of warfare? It's going to be going on in the heavenly realms for a long period of time. In other words, there's always spiritual warfare going on in the heavenlies for every kingdom that rises up and comes down. And God, and at the close of it, he says, and Greece is coming. But he tells them 200 years before it happens. So this idea that in chapter 10, that it's the impression that some people want to take from it is this man in linen can't. And he's so helpless, he has to have helpers. That's kind of, well, Michael had to come help him. No, that's, how might you also interpret that? How might be another way of interpreting that?
He got a different job he had to do, but he couldn't just leave Persia, without somebody fighting back. So he's like, come down here, please. They said, Michael down now. I got to go do this other job.
Yeah. And Mike, yeah, exactly. And you know what's really cool about this? Who is Michael in chapter 12, verse 1? He's the one who watches over Israel. He is there. Now, if he has that assigned position, who assigned him that? God. And if I assigned you a job, what do I anticipate is going to happen? You're going to do it. And if I'm God, I'm not, but if I'm God, I'm going to say to Cliff, I'm giving you the job of XYZ. And not only that, but because I'm God, I'm empowering you to be able to do that. I'm going to give you the authority to be able to do that. And okay, and in this unfolding, yes, he's a chief prince. He's in the highest of the ranks of the rank. Okay, so he's high in rank. He's strong, he's powerful, he's more than capable, and God gave him that role to watch over Israel. And yet this man in linen is there, and he's withstanding them. So it sounds like he is also engaging in this warfare, and yet he didn't leave until Michael came. But what is that positionally? Where does that put the man in linen? Above Michael. That is pretty clear. Yeah. Okay. Now with all those in your little heads, let's move on. Let's talk about the certain man. Okay. All right. So we've got, he's called a certain man. Did anybody look those up? Did you look up a certain, what that meant? Okay. I'm going to give it to you. It's number 259. And what it literally means, since you didn't look it up, I'll just tell you what it literally means is one man. So it's distinguishing him, it's setting him apart, it's highlighting him. And how do we know it's really highlighting him? How do you know that when it says a certain one? How does the text then reveal to you that they're being real specific about this certain one? Yeah, does Michael get that kind of description? Did Gabriel get that much description? So if you put that much, number one, the vision is him.
And wasn't that he described similarly to the drawing that we did? God on his throne with the flaming eyes.
Oh yeah, back in chapter 7.
And the other men fell down and were frightened.
Yeah. What about the Revelation chapter 1 cross-reference? Remember, scripture is to interpret scripture, right? Is Revelation a companion book to Daniel? Is it comparing apples to apples? Yes, we've already determined that. So when John has his vision, he also sees one who's dressed in a robe reaching to his feet. So when this one identifies him as a certain one, literally what it means is this, literally one man. It's like setting him, yes, it singles him out. It distinguishes him as unique. Being, and in the definition, it's the only one is one of the definitions. So let's write that up here. It's a certain man. It's literally, it means one man. So it's actually a numerical term, certain. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's one. I am the first and the last, right? Okay, it's one man. So it singles him out. All right, so that's the first thing we do. He's a certain man. Lots of description. Let's cover it. Let's cover the description on him real quick. Okay, I'm going to put his body as a title. And you said he is dressed in linen. What is that about? Anybody look it up? There you go. There are two things, or could be three, now that you mention that. I didn't cover that one. Three possibilities on the linen when we see people dressed in linen in scripture. Number one, it can be angels. So it can be an angel. It can also be the priesthood that God established in his temple was ephods of fine linen, right? And also we see in scripture later in Revelation 19, the saints are dressed also all in white. It is speaking of the linen, the fine linen of the saints, right? Or it's the righteous works of the saints also. So we see description, it distinguishes him, it sets him apart, singles him out, it puts him above Michael and Gabriel. And those are the two that we know by name that are extremely powerful, extremely valuable in the work of God. They are given extraordinary works of responsibility that are distinguished in such a way that we even get their names. And the other angels, no names are ever given to us, right? Okay, and then,
That's what Hebrews says about him. Remember, he is seated above the angels.
yes, above all the principalities and powers, yes. Yes, okay. So the priests wore linen, vestments, caps, breeches, turbans, tunics. You might want to look at Leviticus 16:4 just to kind of look at that. Also, angels appear in that way. You see this in Ezekiel 9:2 and 3, also in 10. Okay, let's go on about the rest of his body. He's dressed in linen, which tells us it could be the dress or the garments of the high priest or a holy one. So linen would be, I'm not going to describe it up there. You look it up, get your definition, put it on there, because it gives you a palette of things to kind of work off of. Well, it could be an angel, it could be raw, and it could be Christ himself, right? Okay, so now because he is the high priest, right? Okay, I wanted to make that connection because it's the garment of the priesthood, and Jesus is our great high priest. Okay, so now his body in 10:6. Let's go through that. Okay. Okay. Girded with belt of gold, and then it goes on to describe the gold as that of the fine gold of Ufa. Did anybody look at that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
If they really don't know what it is, but it was used once or twice. It was famous for its gold.
There you go. Famous. That's all you really need to know, is that it's such fine gold that it became a famous gold. If you ever lived in South Dakota, there's the Black Hills gold, famous, right? If you lived in Turkey like I did, they're 18-karat gold with this beautiful, deep, almost a rose color to it, also like the Black Hills gold, because it has a higher alloy of copper in it. But each place has its own idea, but some are more valued than others, right? If you're into jewelry, you would know what they are, and I don't, but so that tells you what I know. Okay, so girded with a belt of gold. What else?
The body was like beryl. Yellowish colored, precious gem.
There you go. A precious gem. This was
But with that yellowish color, which would indicate that he was very much like a glowing.
yes,
gold.
but what's more important than the color is that it's precious.
Yes.
It's a precious gem. It's a highly valued gem. His gold belt is what is of high value, right? What do we see about his eyes and his feet?
Face was lightning.
Okay, face. Appearance of lightning. Okay. Eyes. Flaming torches. Arms and feet.
Gleam of polished bronze.
What is that about?
The stone.
The toes of the statue.
Maybe. But what is polished bronze about? Did y'all do a word study? Okay, let's do a word study. Okay, polished bronze. His words, this was cool. It even described how his words were. Words like a tumult. What is that? A roar. It's actually like flooding waters. Have you ever been near a river that's really rushing hard and that's so powerful? Or even a water dam that falls down? That's a tumult. You cannot hear anything. It's deafening. Is it no wonder when Daniel heard his words, he just passed out, face to the ground? That's called a face plant. That's exactly what he did. Words like a tumult. Okay. So it's a loud roar of a multitude. Now that's interesting. This man in linen had a voice that was like a loud roar of a multitude. That's just impressive. And then other words. Now I went on to, as I marked this, I went on to identify him through some of the other qualifiers in here. When an angel is mentioned, he's called an angel, or he's called Michael, or he's called Gabriel. But through this text, he keeps getting qualified. The qualifier marks for him are what? His humanness, his hands, his touch, he resembled a human being. He had human appearance. Okay. So it's not to say that sometimes other angels don't also have some things like that said about them. I'm not saying that, but you have to look at the totality of what's being said here. Now, our cross reference is in Revelations. In that one, I'm just going to read it in order to, move us along here. But in Revelation 1:13-18, John sees a vision also. God's about to give him this vision of exactly these things that Daniel is talking about here. And he says he sees this man, Jesus, in the midst of the lampstands. And the lampstands are representative in that place of the churches of God at that time. There's 7 of them specifically that are mentioned. We're going to get into that when we get into Revelation. You're going to love it. It says in the midst of it is where he is seen, implying that Christ's continual presence and ceaseless activity in the midst of his people on earth. It just shows that he is actively involved. Well, in Daniel, he's actively involved. How? In the heavenlies as the commander of the host, right? He's engaged in spiritual battle. Here in Revelation, we see him engaged in also spiritual battle, but it's amongst the churches. So again, we are host Christian soldiers, right? And in the midst of us also in this book. Now here he says, and I saw one like a son of man, okay? Clothed in a robe reaching to his feet. Does that sound familiar? Girded across his chest with a golden sash. Okay, there we go. Hair like white wool, eyes like a flame of fire. Same phrasing. Feet like burnished bronze. Oops, same one again. Voice like the sound of many waters. Okay, now wait a minute. We've gone far enough at this point, don't you think? That if this is not the same one, he sure does have a twin somewhere. Right? Same subject matter, same end time visions, 2 different visions, 2 different men, 2 different times in history, but seeing the same thing. And qualifiers identifying marks of him are identical. No lengthy list on any other angel, but this one gets it. And not only that, but this angel, this appearance of this man in linen is Daniel's vision.
You know, when I read this week, I didn't go on, but verse 17 says, and when I saw him, I fell at his feet as a dead man.
There you go. I was going to cover that next. That's exactly good.
Right hand.
Yes. Verse 16. He fell at his feet like a dead man. Does that sound familiar? How did Daniel respond? I was going to put Daniel's response. Let's put this up here. He fell. It says he was left with no strength. And also it says he fell into a deep sleep with his face to the ground. Can I just write face plant? Because I'm trying to shorten the words. Okay, that's in verse 8, and this is verse 9. Okay, so that's Daniel's response. And John's response, Kathy, was what?
He fell at his feet as a dead man,
There.
and he laid his right hand upon
Okay.
him. Do not be afraid.
Right. So interesting there is the response of the one like a son of man in Revelation, his response to Daniel's fear and falling faint and dead like a dead man is that he touches him to strengthen him, right? What was the man in linen's response to Daniel?
Then behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands.
Okay, a hand touched me. Whose hand do you think it is? Yeah. Now,
Lifted him up. I mean, it says,
and set him on his feet. Yeah.
which was very tender.
Or set him on his knees and hands and knees, right?
Well, and then it says, and stand upright.
Later he tells him that, because once he gives him that much strength, how many times does he touch him? He touched him again, right? It says in 18, and again he touched him, right? Okay, so let's put 10 and 18 here about the touching. It's exactly what happened in Revelation for John. This man placed his right hand on John, and he said to him, what? In verse 17 of Revelation 1, do not be afraid. What did this man in linen tell Daniel when he touched him in verse 19? Do not be afraid. Okay, I don't know about you, but for me, I came to see there is continuity in this. There are not 3 and 4 different angels popping in and out. To me, it looks like it's a vision about a man dressed in linen. He's well, you tell me why he might be vague. What was promised to Israel's nation? A seed, and they understood that seed was Christ, because in Galatians 3 it tells us that God preached the gospel to Abraham, and Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. And the seed that he was promised, he understood was the Christ, the Messiah to come, right? So here we are, though, back in history. Messiah has not yet come. They are looking for Messiah the Prince. We've seen him come up in Daniel 9, but he's not here yet. So he's really kind of clueless yet about this one who is to come.
So Daniel's still not sure who it is.
Well, I think Daniel does know who it is. I think he understands clearly who it is, but because he has no name yet to be called by, Jesus, he knows him as Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father. That's what he knows. And he knows him as Son of Man, and he knows him as the coming seed, and he knows him as Messiah. But he doesn't have any other experience with him yet. Okay, does that make sense? So from his perspective, he's still a little bit in the dark. Oh boy, do we have so much. No wonder Daniel tells us at the end, those who have insight, that we will gain insight, knowledge will increase. It has increased for us, has it not? We have so much better understanding. When we get into chapter 11, it's not going to be as hard as you think it is, even though the pronouns are tough to mark out. But if you know your history, they're not. And I'm going to help you with that. Kay, many years ago, she doesn't do it anymore, but many years ago, so I'm going to keep on using it. She gave a commentary write-up about what was going on. And I used that commentary, and I went in and wrote my own. Let me just show it to you what I did, if I've got it here. Must be here.
Katie, while you're looking, when we first did Revelation about, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
we didn't understand a lot of what we now see.
Yes. No kidding. I can't find it. I can't find it. It's not in here at the moment. I don't know what I did with it. I thought I had it out here handy. I will have it for you though when it's time, and I will have Kristen send it out.
I have one comment to kind of go with the question.
Yes.
Why? Because I don't think the purpose was not to identify who this was. The purpose of this person coming, was to say, oh, all of this. And so when Daniel's writing it, it's not about spending time saying who this man is.
No, actually, he was the messenger. Oh, and that was something else I wanted to bring up too, because let me see, here it is. That's not it. Oh, it's on part 2, which we aren't going to really get to, so I'm going to just read it to you real quick. Being sent by the Father. Do you remember? And there's another question that kind of creeps in your mind about, well, why does he have to be sent? And if he is in fact Jesus, if that is a pre-incarnate appearance of him, why does he have to be sent? Doesn't he have the authority to just go, right?
It's not yet been given. The kingdom on earth has not yet been given to Jesus.
Okay, there's that.
Prince of
Absolutely. And have you never seen anywhere in the Gospels that Jesus was sent and that the Father sent him? Let me just read a few verses because it'll help you to solidify that question. Matthew 21:37. For I have now come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but to do the will of him who sent me. John 7, he says, I know him because I am from him and he sent me. Therefore, Jesus said, for a little while longer I am with you, and then I will go to him who sent me. In John 8:28 and 29, and also verse 42, he says, so Jesus said, when you, meaning the Jews, lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and I do nothing on my own initiative, but I speak these things as the Father taught me. And he said to me, and he sent me, and he who sent me is with me. Sorry. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him. And then the last one in 42, and Jesus said to them, if God were your Father, you would love me. For I proceed forth and have come from the Father. For I have not even come on my own initiative, but he sent me. John 17, 8 and 12, same thing. He's talking about the Father has given you them to him, right? And he said, everything that he has, the Father gave to him. So what does that tell us about the position or the place or the role of God the Son? He is at the right hand of God. Is he equal to God? Yes, he is God. Yeah, absolutely, he is God. And yet, what does he do in his flesh as a man? He submits to the Father in all things. And he came, it says in Philippians 2, that he put off his deity. He freely set aside his deity, not that it disappeared. He walked in the flesh, he was still God. He still had omniscience, all power. He could have called the angels down and stopped the whole thing if he had wanted. But what did he do? He submitted to the Father's will because there was a plan set down from before the foundation of the world. Right? So I just wanted to kind of give you a few of those because that issue of him being sent and staying where he's supposed to be while he's doing certain things, it's just showing you the obedience of the Son to the Father, and the work of spiritual warfare in the heavenlies is being revealed to Daniel. He's saying to Daniel, you don't have to worry about these world events that are going on. There's a spiritual battle going on. It will be accomplished as God has said. I am telling you the truth, right?
The 3 weeks of fasting, was that during the Passover time?
Yes, it was the Nisan. In Nisan is the Feast of Weeks and the Passover, and there's like 3 holidays in there, and they're all together. Right, right. And he did it for extended time, a little bit before, and I guess a little bit beyond.
24th day of the first month.
Right. And I didn't focus super hard on getting all that cleared out in my head, but yes. So with those 3 weeks were during the time of the Passover, when Jesus would come as the ultimate servant of God and be the sacrifice for men. And Daniel was during that time frame when he only needed to do a week, he did 3 weeks. It just shows the intensity of his desire to understand all these things, right? And wanting to know more details, and wanting to know some exact points. And God is really saying to Daniel at the close of Daniel 12, what? Go on your way, Daniel. Just close it up and seal it because it's for the end times. And as knowledge increases, as time passes, knowledge will increase. He didn't say it in that way, but that's basically what's meant there. And for sure, it has. Because what we can do now is we can look at Daniel 11 and plug in all the names, the covenants that were made, who those kings were. We even know who that despicable king is. And we're going to cover that more in detail later. But for you, what's important is that you get the bigger picture in your mind so that as you're working with it, you don't get wrapped around the axle on all of it. It's going to get explained. Okay. All right. So we see, I was going to look at the spiritual warfare. We really kind of already covered that. So I don't think we're going to go back and revamp on that. Now what we can do, though, is talk about some of the markings real quickly. And I'm going to give you the pronouns from, we'll start in verse 5. We'll just discuss it real quickly and go through 19. Because after that, I think it becomes clear. Because when you hit then in his place, this person's going to, as long as you get the first his in there, you'll be okay, because it's going to talk about a despicable king. And I think you'll, 11. Chapter 11, because that's the one you're all having trouble with, right? With the pronouns, okay? So I'm just going to help you out a little tiny bit, because you know what? This is how I view my teaching. I'm not here to try to trick you up and make you be so frustrated you can't get through the homework. right? I want you to be able to handle your homework and feel good about what you're getting done. So I don't think it's cheating to give this to you. We're going to give it to you later on anyway, but you might as well get your pronouns marked correctly, okay? All right, let's start with verse 3. It says, a mighty king will arise, and he's already told us the realm of Greece is coming in verse 2. So we now know verse 3 is talking about Alexander the Great, correct? Okay, so that part I didn't even really have to tell you. You knew it. And Alexander is covered until through verse 4. And it talks about his kingdom is going to be parceled out to the four winds. We already know about that, right? We've talked about it before briefly. All right, then starting in verse 5, it says, then the king of the south of what? What kingdom are we still in? Greek. So just so you know this, verse 5 through verse 39 is all about Greece, the kingdom of Greece. Yep. 5 through 39. Yep. 30, all the way through 35. I'm sorry, verse 35 through 35. I wrote that down wrong on my paper. 5 through 35. Okay.
So the king of the south is.
Okay, because remember what he just told us was going to happen to Alexander's kingdom.
Oh.
It's going to be parceled out to the four winds.
So the south kingdom of the four.
Yes.
How Greece is broken up.
Yeah. Yes. All of a sudden lights are on.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 right? Now we know that when we hit, then the king of the south of what? In the south part of the kingdom of Greece, right? He will grow strong along with one of his princes who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. His domain will be a great dominion indeed. And so it's talking about the south. Now we'll talk more in detail about what country is that and what are the houses, how it's going to be broken down. We'll get all that later. But for right now, you just need to know that that's speaking of the south. So all of your pronouns in verse 5 are of the south, one color. Verse 6, now you're going to break up into two colors starting in verse 6. Mine is orange and blue. I just wanted them to be distinctive enough that I can see them on a paper at a glance pretty easily, so that I just marked them in two different colors so that I could see the back and forth that's going on between. Yeah. I'm a coordinator girl. Yes, we are simpatico. Okay. Okay, so now what's going to happen is the very first word there is they. After some years in verse 6, they. So that one, guess what? You have to mark it half one color and half the other color. And then put a big circle around it because they are both represented there. They are going to do what? Form an alliance. What's an alliance? It's a covenant, right? So you can mark that in the same way you have always marked your word covenant. Verse 6, alliance. And there's the they just before it. And that's half and half. Now it goes on and it says south, right? And it says north. So now you know who your two pronouns are. They're the south and the north of Greece, because we're the same country, same nation rather. And so then you're going to be, but she will not retain her position. She who? The south. Okay. Nor will he the north, with his power. So there's two norths right there. Yes. Daughter of the north and earth. That's how the marriage. Voila. Bingo. You got it already figured out. I don't even have to tell you the rest of the story. That's awesome. Now you can find a history book. Who made a union? Okay.
So are you marking the daughter of the king of the south the same as the king of the south?
Yes, because she's representing that kingdom. So all I'm trying to do is keep the south and the north straight. So all we're talking about there's going to be a lot of he's and she's, right? But just mark them as north and south, just like the movie. Okay. And so he says, nor will he remain. That's the north. with his power, that's the north, but she, that's the south, will be given up along with those who brought her in and the one who sired her. So all the south, and he who supported her in all these times. So this is all the south. Okay. Verse 7, you ready? You there? Hold on, I'm going to show this to the ladies here on the screen. Can you see that, Michelle? Is that helpful to see the different colors?
Very helpful.
Okay, good. So it just helps you to see how I broke it down into north and south, two different colors. I made them very distinct so they're easy to see at a glance, right? Blue and orange are very opposite, and so it's quick for me to look at it, okay? All right, now he says, but it's okay. Does anybody need a clean observation worksheet?
No, I didn't do a lot for that. I didn't do a lot 'cause I was like,
Okay, good. As long as you didn't, it's good. Here's my tip, and I've told you guys this before, but I don't know that I've mentioned it in this group. I like to make a photocopy of my observation worksheets before I start on them. I keep my original in the back of my Bible or back of my folder, my binder, and then I work on my photocopy. Okay, and that way, when I totally mess it up on situations like this, which I have done, I've already got to redo chapter 10. It's such a mess. I've written so many notes in there now because I was trying to figure out how I really wanted to reason through that man in linen and whether the hand and the face and the one who looked like him was all the same thing. And I think it is. Now that I see it that way, I want to mark it more clearly. I need to clean it up. So now all I have to do is go back and recopy chapter 10 on my printer, and I've got a clean observation worksheet, and I start all over, get it marked so that like this one now is nice and clean and tidy, right? So far.
another thing is for those that took Daniel 1, we got all the worksheets for all the chapters. And Daniel 1, Daniel 2 gave you all of them.
Oh, that's right.
So you actually have another.
So
like, I
save
didn't
your
even touch
ink.
mine.
Yes.
So
Well, you can, or you can just make a copy of the one chapter area that you've got too much markings on and it's backwards or the colors and you can't erase them or whatever if you want to fix it. Okay, where are we? Verse 7? Okay, verse 7, but one of the descendants of her line, her is the south, will arise in his place, that's the north. And he this descendant, so that's the south, will come against their army, the north, and enter the forces of the king of the north. That's simple. Tells you who it is. And then now this he is the south. He will deal with them, that king of the north. I know that one is complicated. You could not have figured that out until you have the names. You did? Oh, you are good. Oh my gosh, Becky is our star. She's our star. Okay, show off. Okay, very nice. Verse 8. Also, their gods, that's the north. And then you can mark all the theirs if you want to. And the gold, he will take into captivity. That's going to be the south, because it's an aggression of the south against the north and their religious factors. And he will take them captive into where? Egypt. Oh, whoops. Now we know who the south is. Who is the south? Egypt. So these are the kings of Egypt in the days of the Greek Empire after Alexander the Great has died, and the lands have been parceled out to the north, the south, the east, and the west. The only two we're talking about are the north and the south. Isn't that cool? Yes, that's it, the Ptolemies. Okay, and then he, on his part, those are both the south, will refrain from attacking the king of the north, tells you again. All right. All right. And then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, meaning the north, the latter meaning the north, will enter the king of the south, but will return to his own land, the north.
Wait, what?
He will return to his own land. His is the north. Okay. 10.
Kind of where that structuring would also maybe help if you break things
Yes, it does. Now, what happens in verse 10 is the emphasis switches, where the first verses from 3 through 9 were, well, no, actually 5 to 9. We're talking about the king, mostly talking about the king of the south, and how he was kind of the big dog on the scene at the time. Now we're going to starting in 10 all the way to 35. It's going to be about this king of the north being dominant. You can kind of see that just by the way the color switched almost all blue here at this point. Okay, so his sons, the north, will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces. One of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, but he the north, may again wage war up to his, that's the south's, very fortress. I bet you can guess the next one in verse 11. Oh, the south. The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. There he makes it nice and clear. Now, what do you think it's north and south of? The beautiful land, who is the jewel of all the things that they possess, right? God perceives it as the jewel. The Jews perceive it as the jewels, and we know they are at the heart of all the messages that are given. The whole reason the message is given, it's all about what God is going to do with Israel, because Israel is his light on the hill. And so north and south of Israel. Then it says, then the latter, the north, will raise a great multitude, but that multitude, that being of the north, will be given into the hand of the former, the south. When the multitude of the north, that's north, is carried away by the south, his heart will be lifted up. He, the south, will cause tens of thousands to fall, and he, the south, will not prevail. Okay, 13. Everybody okay? How y'all doing? Yoshiko, are you handling this okay? Good. And you're doing good thing. Michelle says thumbs up. Yay. Okay.
The 12, the multitude is
The north. North.
But all the rest of the keys are south.
And the rest of them are he, the south.
That, which would make sense because his heart's going to be lifted up. He just won what he thought was the war.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. It's all going to start. Once you get the correct pronouns in place and you see this battle between these two places, and how it makes sense too, because Israel being in the middle of them, they keep passing through her and she gets squashed along the way. That's why he tells her there's going to be wars and such that are going to come, and it's going to attack you, and there's going to be aggression against, where did I see it? Wars that are headed, and his people, Israel, will suffer. They're going to have suffering because of this aggression that's going on, this power struggle in Greece between these two kings who are actually king of one nation. It's kind of like our Congress, the House and the Senate, and they battle against that's kind of what's going on. It's a battle. It's a power battle. Okay. 13, for the king of the north will rise again, a greater multitude than the former. After an interval of some years, he, the north, will press on with a great army, his army, and with much equipment. 14, now in these times, many will rise up against the king of the south. Easy, right? The violent ones among your people. Who's your people? The Jews. Very good. Will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision. Now we're going to talk about all that later, but okay. But they, who? The Jews, will fall down. I honestly think you could give yourself a cross-reference to 8:10. I'm not positive, but that I penciled it in. So you might want to just pencil because it might be wrong. But I picked up on it when it's talked about some of the stars that will fall. Okay. Verse 15, king of the north will come up and he'll capture the well-fortified city, and the fortresses of the south will not stand their ground, not even their choicest troops, for there will be no strength to make a stand. But he, the north, who comes against the south, him, the south, will do as he pleases, he, the north. He's going to do as he pleases. And no one will be able to withstand him, the north. He will also stay for a time in the beautiful land. Where is that? Israel, right? And with destruction in his hand. That's where I kind of came up with the totality of these people will be suffering. There will be destruction coming against their land at that time. Verse 17, he, the north, will set his face to come with the power of his whole kingdom, the north, bringing with him, the north, a proposal of peace, which he will put into effect. He, the north, will also give him, the south, the daughter of women to ruin it. How do you give the daughters of your kingdom to another kingdom to ruin it? How does that happen? Intermarrying. Yeah. Weakening their resolve as a people, maybe even dividing their hearts. Who are you loyal to, right? Okay. So it, meaning the south in that verse 17, and she, the south, will not take a stand for him, the north, or be on his side. So even though there's a union made there, apparently there's trouble in marriage. It's right. 18, when he, the north, will turn his face to the coastlands and capture many, but a commander, now this is, we're going to get into this later. This is speaking of, there's a Roman general that's going to come on the scene here. He will put a stop to his scorn against him. So he will put a stop to the north's scorn against the south. So the first his is north. Again, scorn against him, the south. Moreover, he, that commander, so that's a third color. You have to kind of color him separately. Will repay him, the north, for his scorn. So there's a third party that gets.
First
he is north. His face is north.
and he had the commander.
Then there's a commander. Mark him different color altogether. The commander is separate from all of this. That commander is going to put a stop to the north scorn against the south.
And the commander will repay the north.
For his scorn. Yep. I know. So,
Is this clear in the Greek?
no, this is why Daniel said, I don't get it. I don't understand these details. Now, he understood the big picture. He understood it was about Israel. He understood it was about kings and kingdoms rising and falling. But if this confuses you and I in its ancient history, can you imagine Daniel? This is several hundred years before any of this happens, right? Because we're at the beginning of the Persian Empire. It's going to be 200 years before Greece even comes on the scene.
So did the commander come from the south?
Nope.
Well, then who's the him after his scorn?
The north. The north is his scorn, the scorn of the north. So him is the north against the south. And then there's that commander again.
Okay, the commander is
No. The commander is a Roman.
We don't know yet.
That
he's the north.
No, he's a Roman.
Well, Roman is maybe a little
Roman
bit more
Empire,
north
not
of
Greek.
Egypt.
No, Roman,
Empire.
a Roman Empire general
Right.
who's not on the scene yet.
But it's north of Egypt.
Nope. Okay, don't go there.
Yeah.
Just mark the general distinctive. He's not north and he's not south. He's a different guy altogether.
So the him is why the him was south.
Okay.
That's good.
Or just leave that verse empty. If you're really confused on anything, leave it empty.
Yeah.
Just leave it. We'll get, when I explain the history, all those pronouns are going to get names. And that'll help you a lot. It helped me a whole lot when she gave us that. Okay, that takes us down through 19. So he will turn his face toward so he will turn his face toward the fortress of his own land. But he will stumble and fall and be found no more. Nope. The north. Very good. 19 is about the north, what's going to happen to the north. Remember what I said to you, starting in verse 10, it makes a switch to the emphasis is about what goes on in the north, that kingdom of the north. In the beginning, the first few verses was primarily about the south and north. Now it says, although we're still in the north, starting in verse 20, there's a new person identified here. Then in his place will arise, in his place, that's the north, will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom. Who's that? Israel. Yet within a few days, he, that king of the north, will be shattered, though not in anger nor in battle. Okay. 21, in his place, that king of the north, a despicable person will arise.
Is that the same one as one will arise who will send an oppressor?
Which verse?
Verse 20.
Who is one?
20 and 21.
No, 20 is finished history. We're now moving forward. Verse 21, in his place, a new king.
But in 20.
In 20, then in his place.
So you have a king of the north, and then in his place, because he dies or whatever, he has an oppressor, and then that guy goes away, and now we're into another.
Okay.
Yes,
Correct?
thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Another word.
So
Another
you can
now,
look
this
here
despicable
closely.
person is a different now.
I have the kings of the north, and then starting in verse
This guy
21, we start with this guy who's a despicable king.
goes away, and then another one. They're all coming out of it.
Okay. So in 21, in his place, a despicable person will arise on whom the honor of kingship has not been confirmed, but he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue. So yes, he's a king. Okay, right,
They're still in the north.
right. And I think because of time, we're going to stop. Okay. The rest of that, I think, I know.
One more week when we do.
We have a lot of time, but what I did is I got you through those really tough ones, and this despicable one is pretty easy to follow. Kind of, if you're just reading carefully and thinking it through, you're going to be able to see north and south in there. But because the primary emphasis in here is about the despicable one and the things that he's going to do, and we've looked at someone that looks like him before, and what we're going to have to do is say, well, is this the same one as Daniel speaks about with the little horn that rises up, or is this a different one? Okay. All right. Yay. All right. We are good to stop the recording. Bye, you guys. See you next week. Thank you.